First thing that you have to do, you open your made fabric. This is the front of my fabric and this is the back. You put the both side seam of the top together like this. Take it to your sewing machine, stitch the side seam with 1 centimeter seam allowance, and then you take your lining, you repeat the same process. Put the both side seam together, stitch the side seam with 1 centimeter seam allowance. Depends on the seam allowance that you prefer to add on your fabric. Go ahead and stitch the side seam together. Once you have done that, you take your sleeve. This is my ruffle sleeve. Put the both front fabric together. Go ahead and give it a top stitch all the way down like this. And you repeat the same process with the second sleeve. Go ahead and top stitch with 1 centimeter seam allowance. Once you have done that, you take your strap. So when you cut your strap, remember to know the front and the back. So this is the front. I give it a notch. I hope you guys can see that. And this is the shoulder. Where I join the shoulder, I give it a notch. So what you are going to do, I'm not going to stitch this side. I will take this side to my sewing machine and top stitch with 1 centimeter seam allowance. And I will also repeat the same process with the second strap. Pinning together, top stitch with 1 centimeter seam allowance. Go ahead. I have stitched my top dress together, the side seam, and I've also stitched my lining. I press the seam apart, and I've also stitched my strap. You can see that I understitch it. So what you're going to do, you just push the seam towards one side and you understitch it inside. Take it to an ironing board and give it a good press. This is how it looks. And I've also stitched my sleeve. I also understitch it. And I set my sewing machine to the longest stitch. I just give it a gather stitch thread. This is how it looks right now. The next thing that you have to do, you're going to put your top dress together, both lining, made fabric are facing each other. What you're going to do, you're going to pin around the armhole. Once you have done that, take it to your sewing machine, stitch it with 1 centimeter seam allowance. Once you have done that, you take your strap. This is my strap. From this end right here, moved inside 1 centimeter, that will be your sewing allowance. And this other side, the same thing. This is the front, which I have given it a notch. I will just open it like this and take my sleeve, put them together, and go ahead and give it a notch like this. So what you're going to do, you put them together. This is the where I understitch it. Make sure it's facing up. Place the both notch together like this and secure that with a pin. And then this other side, the end of the sleeve, this is my 1 centimeter. So when you're going to pin it, make sure you push this edge out so that it's not pointing in. If it points in when you top stitch, it will be coming out from your dress. So you want to point it out like this, and then you pin that in place. And then you come to the other side, you repeat the same process. Make sure you point the sleeve head out. Pin that in place. So what you're going to do, you're going to gather the sleeve on the strap. You just go ahead and start pulling it. Once you have done gathering it, take your pin and pin the sleeve on the strap. I have pinned my sleeve on the strap. The next thing that you have to do, take it to your sewing machine, go ahead and top stitch. Once you have done stitching, remove the gather stitch thread, remove your pins, and then you fold the sleeve inside like this, and then you turn it over like this and top stitch it all the way down. So you're using this your lining to cover the raw edges of your sleeve. You also repeat the same process with the second sleeve. Go ahead and stitch them together. I have ironed my sleeve. This is how it is. And this is the second pieces of my sleeve. I have ironed them together. The next thing that you have to do, we are going to pin it on our top dress that we are making. So this is the sleeve. Make sure it's facing the armhole. You just pick your top dress, you open it like this, pin it together, and you do the same thing on this other side. Open your top dress, place your sleeve, pin it together. So once you pin it together, this is how it will look. The next thing that you have to do, you're going to pick your sleeve like this and pick the back of your top dress. Go ahead and put them together. So once you have done that, then turn the dress inside out. Once you turn your dress inside out, this is how it will look. The next thing that you have to do, just go ahead and put them together properly. You can go ahead and start pinning the neckline of the dress, or you can also call it the chest line of the top dress making. I have pinned together. The next thing that you have to do, go ahead and top stitch with 1 centimeter seam allowance. Depends on the seam allowance that you add on your fabric. Top stitch with 1 centimeter seam allowance, and you also take your back, top stitch with 1 centimeter seam allowance. Once you have done that, take your scissors, snip around the curved edge, turn it inside out, and give it a good press. I have stitched my strap on the top dress and the sleeve. This is how it looks once you have done that. I take it to my ironing board, I turn it inside out, and I give it a good press. The next thing that you have to do, we are going to stitch the center back. You just take your fabric, fold it over like this. You go ahead and pin it in place. Once you have done pinning, take it to your sewing machine, stitch it with 1 centimeter seam allowance. Depends on the seam allowance that you add on your fabric. You also go ahead and repeat the same process with this other side. Stitch it with 1 centimeter seam allowance. Once you have done that, you take your skirt. What you are going to do, you put the both fabric together. Make sure that both front fabric are facing each other. From the center back, what you are going to do, you place your ruler or your measuring tape. You measure down 12 centimeter. So this is my 12 centimeter. I place a different pin here. You can see I place a green pin, so I'm going to start stitching from here all the way down. Once I am done with that, I will take it to my overlock. I will overlock the raw edges, or use zigzag to overlock the raw edges. You also do the same thing with your lining. I have stitched the center back of my top. This is how it looks. You just turn it inside out and give it a nice press. This is how the center back look. And I've also stitched the center back of my skirt. I just give it a top stitch. I take it to my overlocker. I overlock the raw edges. And I've also stitched my lining. I have stitched the center back. I just hem my lining all around. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put my lining inside before I will stitch a gather stitch thread on the waistline of the skirt. So this is the back of my lining, and this is the front of my lining that is inside. So I'm going to put the back inside the made fabric like this, so that when the child is wearing it, this will be the front of the lining. So the back is facing the back of the made fabric. I will just put them together like this, and I'm going to pin them all around. I have pinned my lining inside the made fabric. This is how it is. The next thing that I'm going to do, I will take it to my sewing machine and I will stitch a gather stitch thread all around the lining. Once you have done with that, cut a piece of fabric. The length of my fabric is 30 centimeters and the width is 6 centimeters. So you cut it just one pieces. We are going to attach this fabric at the center back right here. That is why we are cutting this fabric. So go ahead and stitch a gather stitch thread on your skirt. I have stitched a gather stitch thread on my skirt. The next thing that you have to do, you take your fabric. I'm going to pin it on the center back of the skirt. So I will turn my skirt like this. I'm going to start pinning from inside the skirt. I have pinned it in place. The next thing that you have to do, take it to your sewing machine, go ahead and top stitch. Once you have done stitching, you see this mid part right here, that is the center back. What you're going to do, you take your scissors, make sure you snip it very close to your stitch thread. I have given it a top stitch. This is how it is, and this is how the inside of the skirt will look once you have done that. And I've also snipped very close to my stitch thread. The next thing that you have to do, you fold inside 1 centimeter. You're going to use it to cover the raw edges of the seam allowance. You just go ahead and pin it all around. Once you have done that, take it to your sewing machine and top stitch. I have stitched it together. This is how it looks right now. So I fold inside. You just fold it into two and use this other side to cover it like this, or you can also do it the other way, while this side will be open, and use this side to cover the other side of the blanket. But I'm going to fold mine like this because this is where I'm going to put my buttonholes. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to place a pin right here so that I know that this is the side I'm going to fold inside, while this side is open. So the next thing that you have to do, you put your fabric together and you give it a cut so that you know that this is the mid part of your fabric. And you also do the same thing with your top dress. Give it a cut so that you know that this is the mid part of your top dress. So what we are going to do, I will just turn my skirt like this, and I'm going to put the both mid part together, and I will pin that in place. You can see that I separate my lining. Once I am done stitching my skirt on my top dress, then I will fold my lining 1.3 centimeter to cover the raw edges of my gather stitch dress. So this is the open side of my placket. I will place it like this. You just open it the way it is. I will place it like this and pin it in place. And then we'll come to the other side. I will repeat the same process. So this is the blanket that is folded inside. So you just fold it the way it is. Do not open it. And you pick your center back. You open it like this. Place it at the edge. Both edges are matched. And then you pin that in place. So what you're going to do, you just go ahead and gather your skirt on the top dress that you are making. I have pinned my skirt all around. The next thing that you have to do, take it to your sewing machine. Go ahead and stitch it with 1/2 inch seam allowance or 1.3 centimeter. Once you have done that, remove the gather stitch thread. Take it to your overlocker and overlock the raw edges. I have stitched my skirt on the waistline of my top dress. This is how it is. I take it to my sergio. I just overlock the raw edges. You can see that. And I also take it to my ironing board. I fold inside 1/2 inch or 1.3 centimeter. So I'm going to use this to cover the raw edges. That means you're using your lining to cover the raw edges of the waistline of your dress making. Once you have done that, take it to your sewing machine and top stitch it all around. When you are stitching, you are going to start stitching from the front of the fabric, not from the inside. So I will start stitching from the front of the fabric. Once you have done with that, you can then take your skirt to your sewing machine, fold inside 1 centimeter, fold it again 1 centimeter, and top stitch. That means you're hemming your skirt. You can also hem your lining. I've already done that. But the way I'm going to hem my made fabric, I have cut out a fabric. So this is my ruffle fabric that I'm going to gather at the bottom edge of my dress. Once I am done gathering it all around, and I will pin it in place, take it to my sewing machine and top stitch. Once I am done stitching, I'll remove the gather stitch thread, take it to my overlocker and overlock the raw edges. I have top stitch around the waistline, and I've also stitched my button at the center back of the dress. This is how it is. And I've also stitched my ruffle fabric at the bottom edge of my dress. This is the final look of my dress. You all should have a wonderful day. Bye.